every single day on The View is a contest in stupidity. Truly, it's an amazingly competitive match between some of the dumbest people on earth. No one really notices on a given day that Whoopi Goldberg is a very dumb person who says very dumb things because everybody else is so dumb on The View that she's constantly outshone. She seems like the most sane person on The View, which is kind of an amazing statement. Trying to suss out which person on The View is least intelligent is an exercise in quantum mechanics.
What happens when a rapid-fire debater meets a wall of dramatic size? You get Ben Shapiro dismantling Whoopi Goldberg's latest rant in real time. Her argument didn't just fall flat, it practically tripped over its own contradictions. And yes, the internet is eating this up with a giant spoon. From stunned silences to logic grenades, this clash felt like a philosophy lecture barging into a reality TV set. Keep watching, because whatever Shapiro just unleashed, Whoopi might need a therapist and a timeout to recover. Brace yourself, this one gets savage.
Whoopi Goldberg, she of the genius sort of sage presence on The View.
Thanks.
She's like, I'm not saying that maybe white people need to get beaten up for police reform to happen, but maybe white people need to get beaten up for police reform to happen.
But how many times do we need to see white people also get beaten before anybody will do anything?
Okay, so first of all, this is unbelievably stupid.
Yep.
We've seen many, many cases of police brutality against white people.
Picture this: bright, pastel-colored sets, overly caffeinated hosts, and an audience clapping like they're on autopilot every time a sentence remotely echoes a liberal talking point. Amidst all this sits Whoopi Goldberg, confidently holding court as the undisputed queen of half-formed opinions, her shield of "my truth" held high. Everything seems just fine in her world of circular reasoning and applause-o-meter logic. That is, until the atmosphere shifts. Enter Ben Shapiro, a whirlwind of fast-paced facts and sharp rhetoric, ready to stir things up.
Well, folks, as you know, I love one show on TV more than any show on TV. The View.
Gary!
I've had a lifelong ambition to actually be a guest on The View. They'll never have me on, of course, because it would go horribly for them. But today, we're going to go through some of the cringiest moments from The View, a repository of nearly all human stupidity, total IQ 7.
Imagine the scene. The View, a cozy little bubble where your favorite I feel moments and cocktail party philosophies get aired out for the world to see. But lurking just beyond the screen, in the shadows, is Ben Shapiro. You know the type. The guy who treats facts like an extreme sport and speaks like a hyperactive chipmunk after an espresso shot. He's not actually on the show, of course. Instead, he's sitting back, dissecting them from afar with the precision of someone who's never met an argument he couldn't turn into shredded paper.
She's trying to make an anti-Trump argument. She's like, I can say anything I want. And she's like, I'm going to say something super racist. They're all like, yeah. Well, apparently her hair was not her only bad decision that day.
The Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
No,
it's about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
No!
That's what it's about.
Placing Ben on The View would be like tossing a Rubik's Cube into a kindergarten art class. Sure, everyone's in the same room, but no one really knows how to handle it. Whoopi strolls in with her vibes, a few recycled Twitter hashtags, and some emotionally charged rants. Then Ben enters armed with cold, hard statistics, historical facts, and a rapid-fire argument style that could have the Constitution read aloud before anyone even finishes their opening sentence.
On who you talk to. Whoopi, always available to sign in.
Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
To both compare Israel and the United States to terrorist organizations and also compare terrorist organizations to apparently not terrorist organizations. Like, Hamas is not a terrorist organization? Oh, man. It is amazing because Whoopi is sort of seen on this show as sort of the wise old sage. And I have to say, you need better sages.
You know,
This wasn't a debate, folks. It was a philosophical mugging. Whoopi kicked things off with a rant that felt like a cross between a monologue and a Twilight Zone episode. Her words flew around like someone trying to throw spaghetti at the wall of reality, except none of it stuck. I feel like something is wrong, so clearly something is wrong, she declared, as though the universe should shift to match her emotional state. Just as the rest of The View's hosts were gearing up to nod along and pretend it made sense, Ben blinked, looked into the void, and calmly said, "Actually, that's when the carnage began." Now, Ben didn't just disagree. Oh no, that would have been too easy. Instead, he dismantled her argument in real time, like a surgeon performing brain surgery with the lights off. You could practically hear the gears in Whoopi's brain grinding to a halt as Ben unleashed a flood of receipts faster than a caffeinated librarian on a deadline. You could almost see her mind scrambling for an escape route, like a hamster trying to dodge a sneeze.
So Whoopi Goldberg was on that great repository of all human intelligence, The View, and she was explaining that people who are not using masks are going to make things more dangerous for themselves. She's talking about how the mask will protect you from the flu. Oh, Lord. Here we go.
Well, no, you know.
Well, you did have that.
I did have a cough, and when you did not show up, Brian goes, thanks, Whoopi's out.
Well, I assume that is because when you have little ones, you will always have things that you travel with. So as people will tell you, yeah, take off your mask, don't worry about it, we're not going to check anymore. Just know the flu
is still
will fly in. Yeah. Okay, because the flu flew in and got me.
Okay, so I'm just going to point out here that the entire narrative on the mask was about COVID. And now they're you should probably wear a mask because if you take off the mask, the flu will fly in.
To be fair, Whoopi gave it her best shot. She stuck to what she knew, raising her voice. Surely if she got loud enough, her argument would sound more convincing, right? But when that didn't work, she went for her backup plan, the classic, well, I just believe so line. In Whoopi's world, that's the debate version of dropping the mic. The idea is that by merely stating what you believe, it should end the conversation. But Ben, totally unshaken, came back with his usual arsenal. Citations, a touch of smugness, and an avalanche of economic theories that most people couldn't even pronounce. By the time he wrapped up, you could practically see the life drain from the room. In the background, Joy Behar was squinting, clearly trying to process the data like she was reading a complex equation without any of the key numbers. The audience? Well, bless their hearts, they responded with an uncomfortable laugh. Not because it was funny, but because they had absolutely no idea what had just gone down. Meanwhile, Whoopi was left clutching at her emotional arguments, desperately holding onto them as Ben's cold, hard facts hit her from every direction. But why did it sting so much? It wasn't just that Ben was right, it was that he came prepared.
We saw Whoopi Goldberg over the weekend suggest that Nikki Haley is not a new generation. How can you say she's a new generation? Whoopi Goldberg is 67 years old. Nikki Haley is 51 years old. Donald Trump is nearing 80. Joe Biden is 80. So yeah, technically speaking, she is in fact a new generation. But here's Whoopi Goldberg speaking for the youth of America.
Now that's what they're saying. Suddenly, everybody said, oh yeah, it should reflect all of us. Okay.
The most unforgettable moment, the one that hit like a ton of bricks, came when Whoopi paused. You could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she desperately searched for something, anything, to respond with. It was like watching a computer freeze up mid-load. Ben, meanwhile, was as smug as a cat that's figured out exactly where the treats are stashed. He patiently waited for the silence to spread throughout the room, and when it did, it was pure gold. Of course, the internet couldn't let it go. Twitter exploded, and the memes came pouring in. The online world had one collective thought: reality doesn't care about your feelings. The screenshots came flying faster than Whoopi's thoughts, and even Instagram jumped in, eager to get a piece of the action. But the real entertainment started when people began to revisit Whoopi's past. Remember the time she made an historically odd claim that had even Wikipedia scratching its head? Or that time she tried to explain economics and ended up making her own version of Monopoly? Yeah, those didn't age well. And it only made Ben's takedown seem even more like a you should have known better moment. That said, credit where it's due, Whoopi wasn't totally defenseless. She still had the trusty shield of mainstream media to fall back on, scrambling to defend her faster than a reality show contestant trying to spell banana. Think pieces appeared overnight arguing that Whoopi's emotional insight was worth more than Ben's cold, hard data.
This was taken as anti-Semitism. She didn't say the Jews weren't specifically targeted, by the way. She didn't actually say an anti-Semitic thing the way that Whoopi Goldberg did. She just said that when people are inhumane to each other, bad things happen. For this great crime, she was not suspended. She was fired outright from The Mandalorian, losing presumably hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary because she was one of the main characters and they were considering a spinoff of The Mandalorian with Gina. They fired Gina, so we hired her, right? We have a new movie that's coming out with Gina Carano in the next couple of months, which I'm excited to tell you about. Okay, but they fired her outright, did Disney. Whoopi Goldberg says something far worse in every respect than Gina Carano ever said about the Holocaust. And she's going to get a 2-week suspension.
Meanwhile, Ben, still riding high on his logic-powered victory, took a slow sip of his iced coffee, nodding solemnly as though he'd just clinched a spelling bee championship while the rest of the room doodled on their test papers. The real takeaway from this showdown wasn't just the burn, it was the silence. That heavy, awkward, soul-crushing silence. The audience didn't know whether to clap, cry, or just pretend the whole thing never happened. Even the applause sign operator threw in the towel and took a break. This was the kind of silence that separates talkers from thinkers. While one side was tripping over emotional outbursts, Ben was laying down the facts with the precision of a champion. Of course, Whoopi wasn't done. Still licking her wounds, she attempted a follow-up that only made things worse. It wasn't really a clarification, it was more like an uncoordinated dance of denial. Her big defense? Well, I just felt like what I said was valid because it felt valid when I said it. This, folks, is like trying to return a toaster without the receipt, insisting it's broken even though you just didn't use it correctly. Ben, of course, remained unfazed. His version of gloating, casually referencing Aristotle in a monotone voice while sending you a link to an article you didn't ask for. He's basically Wikipedia with Wi-Fi and a touch of superiority, and in this case, it worked.
Never look for consistency with the left. It is all just a game of power. In any case, Goldberg apparently is livid and feels humiliated over the suspension. She feels ABC executives mishandled this. She followed their playbook. She went on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert and then apologized again on The View the next day, the source told the Post. Her ego has been hurt. She's telling people she's going to quit. Suspension from The View is like getting suspended from Bravo. The bar is very low. Prior to her suspension, sources that spoke with Page Six said that employees and executives, including insiders at Disney, were furious over her remarks and the fact she had not been disciplined yet.
The internet crowned Ben the victor, not because he's always right, but because Whoopi entered the debate armed with glitter and emotions and left with a headache and a series of logic misfires. Now, Ben isn't everyone's favorite. Some find him smug, robotic, or like he's racing against a timer on a game show. But when the opposing side's argument boils down to, I feel like this should be true, suddenly Ben comes across like a modern-day Socrates. In this clash, Ben wasn't just a debater. He was a wood chipper, and Whoopi's argument was a tree branch made of feelings. Once it entered, there was no coming out in one piece. Even her co-hosts seemed like they needed a moment to regroup after Ben dissected everything. One of them, clearly trying to salvage the vibe, chimed in with a classic, "Let's just agree to disagree," which in TV language translates to, "Please stop making sense. You're ruining our brunch energy." In the aftermath, Ben's YouTube clip of the exchange racked up more views in 24 hours than The View had gotten in an entire week. Sure, that's not saying much, but still, point for Ben. Meanwhile, The View just carried on like nothing happened, quickly moving to their next segment on, who knows, astrology or some other bulletproof topic. But just when you thought it was over, Ben dropped a podcast episode where he dissected the takedown like a football coach reviewing game footage. He broke down her sentences, pointed out every inconsistency, and even quoted legal precedents. Meanwhile, Whoopi, she was probably burning sage and calling Oprah for some emotional backup.
Whoopi Goldberg, yesterday, she did her full apologies. You'll remember that 2 days ago, Whoopi Goldberg went on The View and she suggested that the Holocaust was not about race. And this tied into a broader ideology of the left, which suggests that Jews are white people, and therefore, the Holocaust was actually white people attacking white people, which is a thing she actually said on air. Then she went on Stephen Colbert, where she quasi-apologized and then doubled down and suggested once again that the Holocaust was not about racism because it was white people attacking other white people. She issued a written statement. The written statement came out before the Colbert appearance, but probably was written after she had taped for Colbert already. In any case, she came out on the air yesterday, and then she did her fulsome apology.
In the end, this wasn't just a debate. It was a masterclass in what happens when you confuse applause with accuracy. When your entire argument is based on how something feels, it's bound to crumble when someone shows up armed with facts. That's why this moment went viral, not because Ben's always right, but because it was the intellectual equivalent of challenging a chess grandmaster with finger puppets. To anyone out there using the I feel like argument, just know that somewhere, Ben Shapiro is cracking his knuckles, getting ready to turn your emotional TED Talk into a logical demolition derby. And then, the silence hit. It was so deafening, it could have sucked the sound out of a jet engine. Whoopi, the self-proclaimed warrior of the woke world, ran out of steam. For 5 solid seconds, the entire room was filled with pure, undiluted, "I've got nothing," served with a side of blinking confusion and a serious case of mental whiplash. Ben, smug as ever, sat there like a cat who knew it had won, patiently waiting as the camera zoomed in. You could almost hear the co-hosts' inner monologues. Joy Behar looked like a deer in headlights. Sarah Haynes was desperately signaling for an emergency exit. And Sunny Hostin realized she'd backed the wrong horse in a very dumb political race. But then Ben delivered the final blow. No applause necessary. The View aged a decade in mere minutes. This wasn't just a debate. It was a lesson in logic, served with a side of facts and a healthy dose of sarcasm. If you come to a logic fight armed with nothing but vibes, you're leaving with less than your dignity. Whoopi Goldberg's track record is like a high-speed train full of controversy, but not in the fun, I can't look away kind of way. It's more like, I can't believe I'm witnessing this, but I wish I weren't. From bizarre historical takes to outright wild statements about complex issues, Whoopi's track record is a buffet of head-scratching opinions. Remember when she famously said the Holocaust wasn't about race? Just another gem in her long list of unhelpful comments. And who could forget her claim that black people can't be racist in the same way everyone else can? Ah, Whoopi, always ready to make explosive statements with all the grace of a bull in a china shop. This is the same woman who's turned Whoopi Says Something into an almost weekly news event where even her fans hold their breath, wondering what gaffe is coming next. When you're a cultural icon but can't seem to grasp basic concepts of racial history or human decency, your shelf life is going to be shorter than you think. Now let's talk about the public perception of Whoopi and, of course, Ben Shapiro. Ben's a walking, talking contradiction. Smug, sure. Sometimes insufferable, absolutely. But when he's in full debate mode, ready to engage, he's less of a troll and more of a fact-seeking missile, and that worked here. There's no denying it. Ben did what he does best, calmly dismantling his opponent's arguments with receipts and laser-like precision. While the internet exploded with memes and screenshots of Whoopi's bewildered face, you can hate Ben's delivery all you want, but there's no denying the brilliance of his approach. That awkward pause, that "I've got nothing" moment from Whoopi wasn't just a victory for Ben. It was like watching a train leave the station with Whoopi stuck on the platform, furiously waving a map of the wrong country. As the camera panned to her co-hosts, you could practically feel the sitcom-like awkwardness. But the real moment came when Ben delivered his final point, slow and methodical, like someone who knew they'd already won. It was the knockout punch. No mic drop needed. Whoopi's response was left to reside in the same place as her logic, nowhere. And that, my friends, is what happens when feeling-based arguments meet fact-based arguments.